Welcome back, everybody. Here to host our next conversation, Clarity, What's in It for Web3, is John Paller, founder of ETHDenver and co-founder of the Blockchain Cooperative Coalition.
Thank you. Friday morning, day 3. Everybody get some sleep last night? No. Maybe. So we're going to go ahead and bring out our panelists. We're going to have a conversation about Web3 and the Clarity Act. It's no secret that there's a lot of stuff in there for fintech and big banks and exchanges and things, but without further ado, Connor, come on out. Kyle, James, and Chris. So why don't we just start with you, Connor? Introduce yourself, and we'll just go down the line, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Hey everyone, Connor Spelsi. I'm the head of global policy strategy at the Ethereum Foundation.
Greetings, folks. My name is Kyle Blodge, and I'm the head of policy and public affairs at the Decentralization Research Center.
James Wigginton. I am an attorney at ORIC and also work with the Blockchain Cooperative Coalition.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Land, General Counsel to U.S. Senator Cynthia Lummis and Staff Director for the Senate Banking Subcommittee on Digital Assets.
Great. So we got a lot of guys here that know a few things about what's going on in Clarity. We also got a lot of guys here that know a thing or two about Web3. So Connor, let's start with you. The Ethereum Foundation has a very, I guess you could say, decentralized approach to policy making and has been somewhat hands-off, but you're new to the foundation, but not new to policy. So tell us a little bit about what the foundation's international position is on Web3 as it relates to policy, and how are you thinking about that strategy as it relates to Clarity and your work with others in the community?
Yeah, I think as a lot of people know, the Ethereum Foundation really hasn't been involved very materially in policy globally, particularly considering it's been around for such a long time as compared to other foundations in the space. And that's part of the, the instincts and culture in the foundation, and the thinking is that there are many other representatives of Ethereum, critical stakeholders, because Ethereum is such a decentralized community, who are the best people and organizations to represent Ethereum, particularly in their own jurisdictions, right? Like generally speaking, in Korea, they want to hear from a Korean staker of Ethereum about what Ethereum is more than they want to hear from the Ethereum Foundation. And that's exactly what the community is about. The Ethereum Foundation is not, is one of many representatives of the community, and that's been their view for a very long time. And so I'm not head of policy at the Ethereum Foundation, I'm global head of policy strategy, and that was very deliberate.
That's right.
Right? Because the idea here is that we're not going to be engaging in the kind of traditional way. We are instead trying to help lift up others who, in their own geos, want to be part of the process of advocating. And on this front, something you and I were chatting about previously too is, what are some of the things the Ethereum Foundation cares about? And I think a lot of people in this room probably have some sense. There are true values around things like decentralization, security, robustness of the protocol. These are all absolutely critical to the Ethereum Foundation and have been for a very long time. And that is typically what they're focused on implementing. And we see the incredible use cases that are cropping up everywhere, and all of the financial institutions, traditional and kind of new, that are building on Ethereum. And we think it's fantastic, of course. But there are other goals we have, and I think they resonate with a lot of the builders in the room today. The financial use cases are fantastic, and I personally, speaking on my own behalf, I think stablecoins are critical looking forward. And we also are very excited about all of the next use cases. Decentralized AI, thinking about sort of DAOs at a further scale, thinking about decentralized digital identity. There are so many use cases that we've kind of touched on a little bit, but really haven't seen scale in the same way that we've seen stablecoin scale. And we need to, as a community, continue to care about all of those things, because those are some of the critical unlocks that I think are part of the vision for the Ethereum Foundation, and enabling the builders like those at ETHDenver to get there, and I think it's why it's so important that you put this event on every year.
Well, we're happy to have you, and we're glad that you're at the foundation. I think from my point of view, as one of the people who have, I guess you could say, volunteered myself to be going back and forth to DC, trying to push on, Clarity, previously Genius, trying to really make advancements. I think it's important that the strategy still be there, so thank you for doing that. Now, Kyle, you're at the Decentralized Research Center. you guys put together on one of the core topics that I think is very important to the Ethereum community here is privacy. And tell us a little bit about your work with Seal and the memo that you guys created and how that collaborative process happened, and maybe as a framework for more issues like that.
Yeah. So, well, first off, John, thank you for putting together this panel and this amazing organization. It's been a pleasure working with our team, meeting with builders and so many entrepreneurs in this space. One of the key sticking points right now in the Clarity Act from both sides of the aisle are ways in which we can address the concerns of illicit finance, right? And so many of the conversations in Washington, D.C. from the policymaker perspective was wrongly focused on protocols and builders. And we obviously want maxed out developer protection so that the folks in the audience and people that go to this that the people who go to this conference can continue to build and develop innovation here and all across the world safely with the protections you need. But a lot of individuals in Congress recognize that there are bad actors in this space that want to hack protocols, take assets from consumers. So we took a very, very nuanced and niched approach. We put together a coalition of organizations, including Seal, Ribbit Capital, and Chainalysis, to actually look at who are the nation-state actors like Russia, Iran, China, that are actually going after protocols, trying to take assets from U.S. consumers and builders, and put together a concept of a whole-of-government approach in which the government can create a strategy to actually go after the bad actors that are trying to destroy tech and innovation here while preserving privacy, as opposed to overburdening protocols and destroying innovation here in the United States. And so we took a kind of niche, nuanced perspective there, worked on both sides of the aisle. We've gotten great feedback from R's and D's, and we're hopeful that that proposal can ultimately end up in the final version of the bill.
Yeah, I think this is a good example. So for those of you in the audience here who have issues or topics that are important to you, I'll say it like this. Up until about 2 years ago, I would have said I was politically agnostic. And the reality, though, is that was kind of bullshit. Excuse my solidity French there. But code is political. Bitcoin's political. Ethereum's political. It's all political. Money's political. And so I've evolved my thinking a little bit to have to think about being involved in some way. Like, what do I care about? And if I'm not willing to fight for it, who is? Okay, so these guys are here, and I think this is a great example of how community collaboration can actually come through where, relationships and different channels and, writing good, smart legal, insights or memos to education is key. Because I think a lot of the R&Ds, as you said, they just don't know. They don't know what we care about because they don't hear about it. What do they hear about? They hear about how, exchanges want to be treated because that's who has the money. Seriously. So next up, let's talk a little bit about the future of on-chain organizations, James. You and I have a passion for the future of, I guess you could say, ownership, really. So the Blockchain Cooperative Coalition, tell us a little bit about that, why you care about it, and then what it is, the particular issue that we're actually trying to advance.
Yeah, you bet. I think, maybe the best way to describe what we're trying to accomplish is through a story. So a few years ago, you probably remember Project Liberty launched this thing called the People's Bid for TikTok. Congress passed a law. They said that TikTok had to be sold. Project Liberty thought, hey, this is an interesting opportunity to see if we could have the American people own a social media platform. And so Project Liberty reached out to my law firm. They said, hey, how can we actually make this happen? How can we allow the users to be owners of TikTok? And so we worked and worked. We wrote a big fat memo, and we found that the main obstacle for the users to become owners of TikTok was securities regulations. And there is long-standing precedent, both at the federal level and at the state level, that certain types of ownership interests are not securities. And in particular, cooperatives, they have ownership interests that grant dividends based on your own efforts. They give voting power to their members. And because of certain conditions and restrictions that are on cooperative memberships, these have not been considered securities. So what the Blockchain Cooperative Coalition has been trying to do is advance legislation that would recognize cooperative memberships as non-securities, which would allow Project Liberty, or if there is ever another opportunity to buy a social media platform, or a sports team, or an insurance company,
Or a U.S.
healthcare
Constitution.
or the U.S. Constitution. I don't know if Graham Novak is here, but Constitution DAO tried to do that, right? So if there's ever another opportunity to do that, we will be ready because we'll have the legislation in place to do it.
So speaking from somebody who's been on the inside with you of this, when I think about the future of ownership, there's this concept of if you talk about just the meta-economic design, right now, the pure capitalistic design that we have is you have capital and you have consumers, right? And what is it? Something like 90 some odd % of people don't have any assets in this country.
No, we are a nation of renters, not owners.
Correct. And so the notion of and forget the cooperative nomenclature, because I think that sounds boring and old, but when you talk about the functionality of this particular piece of legislation, what excites you about the idea of giving people ownership? I mean, what's the functional outcome when you say, we're gonna move people from the consumer class to the ownership class, and we're gonna give them opportunity to as participants in business to become owners? From a Web3 perspective, where does that go?
Well, I mean, this really is foundational to the philosophy of Web3. Web3 is about not just getting rid of boards of directors and officers and all that, but it's decentralization of power. It's decentralization of wealth. And what this legislation would do is allow wealth to circulate instead
Profit
of just
sharing.
exactly.
So the securities registration stuff that we've talked about, you can't share profits with non-accredited investors. They can't participate in offerings. They can't invest, right? So it's a walled garden, right, for people with capital, which is why the capital gets richer and other people don't get to participate, right? So all the tokens that we've seen, and you're an attorney that works up in startups, right? So you've seen a lot of tokens.
Lots.
How many of them have actually been able to share profits with their users?
0.
Exactly. Okay, so this is the important part.
Yep.
Right? This economic sort of sharing, stakeholder capitalism. We talk about it in Web3, positive sum games, stakeholder capitalism, all this. This is the legal plumbing for that.
That's right. And I was grateful to Commissioner Peirce, who yesterday recognized that, heretofore, a lot of the tokens, thank you, I'm a lawyer, I have to. Many of the tokens don't have the full package of rights that you would normally get with equity.
Right.
And we're looking to change that. We think that equity is the gold standard of ownership, and it should be more available to people.
Chris, Wyoming is known, and obviously you work at the federal level, but you're a Wyoming citizen, resident. Thank you for coming, by the way, and thank you for demonstrating and showcasing our regional coalition. We're very grateful for Senator Lummis's support, and Governor Gordon, and guys like Tyler Lindholm and the crew, and yourself. When you think about Wyoming and some of the laws that have been built there, like the DAO legislation, the DUNA, these are in that sort of epicenter of trying to deliver, better sort of frameworks, more flexible frameworks for ownership, less regulatory red tape. What are you seeing at the federal level around clarity, if anything, even as it relates to DeFi is going through some of this, there's all sorts of greenfield things that are happening. What do you see as the most important?
The most important from Senator Lummis's perspective is that we build on the good work that's been done in Wyoming and other states, in Colorado and other states, to provide flexibility and legal certainty for those states to continue to grow their own economies, to continue to build their legislative frameworks, and to give flexibility for new modes of technology and new modes of regulation to really rise up. Senator Lummis has been really focused from the beginning of taking what Wyoming's done and exporting it nationally and making sure that we have enabling legislation that at the same time provides legal clarity and protects consumers, but also enables innovation. We love to provide safe harbors instead of being too prescriptive. We're just trying to make sure that we are not hamstringing economic development and the development of technology in this country. The most important thing is also that we don't want a bill that in 10 years is stale or outmoded or has to be replaced. We're really, in Clarity, we're really focused on trying to pass legislation that will stand the test of time, 20, 25 years, 50 years, something as fundamental as the 33 Act or the 40 Acts. We've, in the office, we've started anecdotally calling the Clarity Act the 26 Act. And, hopefully it finds that way into the lexicon at some point in the next few years. But yeah, that's kind of our approach to how we're working on legislation.
If there were a interested citizen, contributor, person, community folks that's interested in actually advancing a topic, Chris, you're on the inside, we're all on the outside looking into the black box. What's the best way from your point of view? Some states have very anti-crypto senators or whatever. They're maybe not so ripe for talking to them. Yeah. How do they get involved?
It all starts just like, in I'm Just a Bill, Schoolhouse Rock, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's, making your voices heard to your state legislators. In general, state legislators have more time and more, have more of an open door policy, and, we'll meet with you and hear your concerns and see if there's something that can be done. Starting at the state level is a lot more beneficial usually than going straight to Congress. Congress has a lot of issues on its plate, and Congress typically reacts to legislation that's done at the state level. So I would say, reach out to your state legislators, get involved politically, write a letter to your state legislator, and go from there.
That's good advice. Decentralized AI. We have centralized AI. We've seen it. Everybody knows what that looks like. OpenClaw is it's open source, right? Is it decentralized? Not sure about that exactly, but there are lots of people working on it. From a policy perspective, I'm curious to hear your guys' individual views. And Connor, let's start with you. I think if I were to say AI is going to change everything, I don't think I'm underestimating that. From a policy perspective, as it relates to Web3 and really driving things like decentralized AI and privacy and ownership and these things, how do you see AI fitting into this tapestry? And then after you go, then Kyle and James and Chris.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm certainly no expert on AI, but I am fearful of a world in which a very small number of companies have massive centralized AI into which we put all of our data, as I'm sure a lot of people in this room are. And we had a great conversation.
Well, it's like the banks for intelligence, and that's a bad thing.
It's very challenging. And we had a great conversation with the Commissioner Peirce yesterday, and she brought up decentralized AI as something that she was really interested in. And one of the major impediments, of course, is competitiveness of the product. From my perspective as a user, in order for me to use decentralized AI, I need to know that it is still a good tool, and I might defer to another product that's centralized if I feel like I can get a lot more done. And that's why we have all these amazing builders in the space, and why I think it's critical that we continue to think about what blockchains can do outside of exclusively the financial use cases, because the ways in which blockchains can be critical to, Rails for agents, but also decentralized AI. And we have a lot of builders in the space who care a lot about this. The Ethereum Foundation has a decentralized AI team. I look forward to seeing what everyone can build, because in order for it to be something, it needs to be competitive. We can't just want it to exist.
So let's, we're slightly over time, so let's rapid fire down the end.
Yeah, I would say decentralized AI is going to be a policy priority for the DRC moving, past crypto. I think one of the key policy areas need to be resolved for policymakers and for the general public is how can individuals delineate between agents and actual humans operating on chain while still preserving private data during those transactions. And so the DRC will be dropping some research and some policy positions on that forthcoming.
James.
So if AI is coming for all of our jobs, including attorneys' jobs, and we're all out on the street, the only people who are going to be able to use AI are the people who own AI. And so we need to put in place systems that allow people to own AI models and everything else, because otherwise we're going to have this two-class system that everybody's so worried about.
Chris?
Well, I'm happy to say that AI is going to be someone else's problem. I'm going to be on a ranch and be tending some cats and horses in a couple of years, and I'll look with great interest on what y'all are doing
I
in
look
the
forward
AI
to the
space.
memes, Chris.
Yeah, crypto's been a lot, and we're looking forward to getting the Clarity Act across the line so that we can let builders build, and we can see how crypto is going to transform economic opportunity in this country.
All right. Well, round of applause, guys, for our panel here. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you.